Hey, peace and blessings, peace and blessings, peace and blessings. Rob YB Youngblood coming at you with session number 12 of the Confidence Builder series. I'm excited because we are rocking and rolling and creating momentum every single day. It is my desire to empower, inspire, and impact you to live out your God given purpose, which is a part of my personal mission that God gave me when I was a teenager. And I'm 45 now, and I'm still getting rolling with that mission. And so I want to welcome you. For those of you, if this is your first time watching this video, if you don't know who I am, I'm Rob YB Youngblood, two-time author, award-winning speaker, public relations consultant, and in many circles I'm known as the LinkedIn locksmith because of my ability to unlock the power of LinkedIn for my clients. But the purpose of this series, the Confidence Builder series, is to enhance your clarity, confidence, and communication skills. It's a part of a bigger vision to break the cycle of poverty and build wealth through the Collaboration Creates Currency movement, which is based on my second book, Collaboration Creates Currency, the blueprint for visibility, credibility, and profitability. And during these sessions, I typically come in to share some insight and wisdom that I take from various books. The last 11 days, I've been focused on sharing knowledge and wisdom from The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz. Phenomenal, phenomenal book. But I decided to put a pause on that for today. I'll come back to it because I want to share some insights from a book by Dr. Eric Thomas, E.T. the Hip Hop Preacher, called UOU. It focuses on igniting your power, your purpose, and your why. And the reason why I want to share some insights from this book is because my heart is heavy. I was talking to a classmate of mine from the greatest HBCU in the nation, Virginia Union University, and she was sharing with me how her sons recently lost their father, and that the emotions that they're carrying is starting to turn out from just this pain and grief to anger, and I can reflect on that because my father was murdered when I was 2, and for 43 years I had, and I still have, a gap. God has healed me, in many ways, but the gap, or the scar rather, still exists. And I realized that there are boys, there are men who are still struggling, right, to manage the emotion, the grief of losing their father. Now, nothing, I'm not taking anything away from young ladies, women, I'm not taking anything away from you, but I'm a man, I'm a father, I'm a husband, and I can speak to men. And so if you can allow me, can indulge me, if you know a young man or brother who could benefit from this message, tag them in this. Because what I'm going to read today is going to empower and inspire him. And I posted a message right before I shared this video, right before I got on this video, asking that if you're a father or a man over 40 and you grew up without your father, or maybe your father's incarcerated, and you found some level of healing, to drop a heart in that particular message, because there are men, there are boys who have not. And I think there's an opportunity for us to fill the gap in their lives, to show them that there are men who were able to overcome, or at least manage day by day, right? And so, emotions are a tricky thing because they can, cause you to see life in a way that's not always the truth. You know what I'm saying? Your emotions and your feelings are real to you, but it doesn't mean that the way you see the world, that's the way that it is. And so oftentimes when we encounter people who have been able to overcome that trauma, that adversity, they start to see life in a total different way. I know I battled with depression. I battled with some addictions. And what helped me was being able to tap into mentors, being able to develop the right mindset, and then develop a methodology to cope and to overcome. So I want to share something out of this book. It's chapter two out of UOU. Some of you may have heard of this book before. You may have heard of Eric Thomas. Eric Thomas, I talk about him often. This is his shirt right here. When you want to succeed as bad as you want to breathe. That's one of his mantras. And when it was 2015, and I was in one of the darkest places in my life, just dealing with a lot of stress and adversity. I was ready to take myself out of here. I have no problem with sharing my story, my testimony. And I went to a sports bar to proceed to drink as much as I needed to, get in my car, and whatever happened, I was ready to go. But before I took that first drink, because it had been 10 years before I had a drink of alcohol, I sent a text message out to a few friends and I just asked them to pray for me. That's all I did. I just said, pray for me. And then my phone dies. Right, my phone dies, and all of a sudden, I would say maybe less than 30 minutes, two of my friends came to that sports bar. I didn't tell them where I was, but they saw the napkin that was under the drink that I took a picture of, and they came and they saw about me, and they stood in the gap for me. Right, they encouraged me to think through my situation and think about the lives that would be touched, think about the people that love me, and they encouraged me to go out and seek therapy. Right, they encouraged me to seek therapy, and I did. And while I was going through the therapeutic process, while I was going through my healing process, I went on YouTube looking for motivation, and I found Eric Thomas, E.T. the Hip Hop Preacher. That was in 2015, 2016, and my life has never been the same because virtually ET stood in the gap. And I established a connection with ET and built a relationship with ET, and so he still stands in the gap. And so now I've gotten to a place where I'm able to stand in the gap for others. And so I do this video to honor those men who've been able to stand firm and stand strong and overcome their adversity with the goal of us standing in the gap for the young men, for the boys, for the older men who have yet to come out of their situation. So allow me, if you will, to share a few nuggets out of UOU. This chapter is called "You Are Never in It by Yourself." You are never alone. Growing up, I think I internalized some deep stuff about slavery, inheritance, and my past. When I was a kid watching Roots or learning about the enslavement of my people in school, it all still felt so close to home. Why did I have to go to school and get a job someday? Why did I have to follow somebody else's rules that didn't have anything to do with how I wanted to live my life? I felt that other people were trying to own my time and my mind. When my father, who raised me, disciplined me, I felt that he was playing the slave master. When my mom kept information from me, it felt like she was trying to manipulate the facts of my life. So to gain back some control, I felt that I had to shut them both out. I was in the victim boys mentality. And when I got into a victim mentality, I shut everybody out and started telling myself I was alone. This is what I know now. If you tell yourself that you're alone, then you are alone. Aloneness is part of the victim mentality. This is the mindset of someone to whom things are happening. When you act like a victim, you close yourself off to communication and relationships. You pit yourself against the world. You dig yourself into a dark hole where no one else can see you or touch you. You close yourself off to potential solutions. But in reality, you are never in it by yourself. The perception That it's you against the world is a construct. The world does not conspire against you. You conspire against you. It is you versus you. Nobody can tell you that you are alone but you. When I found out that I had a biological father, I closed off all channels for communications and solutions. I shut out everybody who had anything to do with my family, my aunts, my grandmas, my family, my friends. I thought to myself, I am alone. And thus I was alone. But it wasn't true. My mom didn't go anywhere. We've been together since the day I was born. My aunts and my grandmothers, my father who raised me, they were all still around. It was me who left. To get away from my family, I started spending more time outside my neighborhood, especially with my boy Bob. His parents were both heroin addicts, and his father was shot 8 times and killed when Bob was in high school. His mom was still dealing with her own recovery when Bob's grandfather stepped in. Gramps, or Elder King as he was called at church, took Bob and his brothers, Bill, Marky, and Wayne, into his 3-bedroom home on 7 Mile, where Bob's step grandmother, her 2 grandkids, and her daughter were all living already. Gramps had a finished had Gramps had finished the basement with 4 bunk beds, a bathroom, and a living area, which is where we spent most of our time. 7 Mile was a whole different world from 8 Mile, where my neighborhood was closer to Southfield, a quieter, suburban kind of place. 7 Mile was right next to inner city Detroit, while 8 Mile was mostly nuclear families doing the Midwestern family thing: house, yard, kids, cars in the driveway, jobs at Ford, Chrysler, and GM. 7 Mile was more multi generational families. Some people had jobs and some people didn't. Just a mile and a few blocks over from my sheltered world, it was a whole different social and economic landscape. Some streets were nice, but if you walked down the wrong block, you had to watch yourself. Bob and I went to high school at Henry Ford and played sports together. On the weekends, Bob went to church, so if I wanted to hang out with him, I went too. Detroit Center was a little hole in the wall church on Puritan and Ward. If you looked in through the front door, you could see right out the back. The floors were covered in thin red burgundy carpet and filled with wooden pews covered in blood red cushions. Detroit Center was a Seventh-day Adventist church, a type of Presbyterian faith that keeps Saturday, the seventh day of the Jewish and Christian calendar, sacred. There were about 45 people who attended regularly, 7 or 8 families and some older folks too. I had no idea I needed it, but Detroit Center was a home I'd been seeking out, and I felt like I had a support system again. For as long as I can remember, I've always felt spiritual. Even though I didn't grow up going to church, I still prayed. My mom sent me to a religious camp when I was 8 years old, and I read all the classic Bible stories kids love: David and Goliath, Joseph and the Pharaoh, Samson and Delilah. Religion isn't necessarily my thing. I don't care for the country club aspect of it, but I love scripture. I still think the idea that Jesus, an ouster Jew who came to save everybody, is beautiful. Beyond that, I'm just a man of the Spirit. I now lead prayer circles with my friends and for NFL players, attend Bible study groups, and I'm the pastor of my own church community. But for me, it's about being together and praying together. It's about relationships. If the Jehovah's Witness knocked on my door, I'll sit down and study with them. If you show up to my church and want to sing hymns and say the Lord's Prayer, you're more than welcome to. When I came into the Detroit Center, I felt the same way. I just like being in church with other people. The congregation was run by Pastor P.C. Willis. He was a military man and a black belt in karate. Pastor Willis was probably 6'1" or 6'2" and always in good shape. When men walk into the same room with one another, we don't necessarily give automatic respect to one another. Male respect is something that has to be earned. But Pastor Willis was a man's man. He could walk into a room and command the respect of everybody within a minute. And when he got up to speak, he spoke with conviction. He was always speaking like it was an emergency, like it was life or death. There was always a call to action. Whatever he was talking about felt like it was the center of the world. And we should be paying attention to it. When I think about my own way of speaking, I see us as being part of the same lineage. Pastor Willis's family was like the Black Partridge family. Him, his wife, his 4 daughters, and a son. They all sang at church. They all did readings. They prayed with each other. It was like everything I'd ever seen on television. When I was in the room, I felt like I could see how life was supposed to be. It's weird. Being homeless was the worst time in my life. Never knowing where I was going to sleep, being embarrassed that I hadn't showered or changed clothes in 3 or 4 days, being alone in my head, but it was also one of the best times too. I was free from the boundaries and the rules of home, cruising around with my boys, soaking up the sounds of Detroit. Hip hop was our language in the 1980s. Driving to Canada on the weekends, hitting Belle Isle in the summer, in souped up Suzukis and Jeeps. But I also found a new home that I'd never known could exist. By the end of the summer of 1987, I was all in at Detroit Center. I spent weekends and weeknights at the church, singing, volunteering for revivals, raising my hand to help with this or that. It was like finding a family that I didn't know I could have. We would eat together, pray together, go to barbecues at people's homes. There was a sense of togetherness that was new, but also felt familiar. This feeling of chosen family, along with a newfound freedom I'd always craved, was powerful. I was making my own decisions. I was playing by my own rules and nobody was interfering. Nobody was telling me I couldn't do this or that. Nobody was whipping me for acting up or breaking the rules. Even when I was sleeping on the streets, I felt like my own person, like I was finding a part of myself, and the world beyond that life had imposed on me. Of course, there were moments when things were dark. Times when I'd be sleeping in a cold, echoing building, wondering if anything would ever be okay again, questioning if I would ever feel connected to anyone again. But when I got to church, I felt embraced and seen and loved. One of my strengths is that I'm a naturally positive person. I've always seen the glass as half full, and I've always been attracted to people. Talking and connecting with people is what gives me energy. It's how I recharge. So even when I chose to leave my home and my family, I naturally gravitated towards another kind of family. When I found the church, it was the first time in my life that I selected people for myself. Everyone I had been surrounded with before in my life by virtue of family ties and geography. The people I knew were the people in our neighborhoods, my family in Detroit and Chicago, my friends at school. When I found the church, it was the first time I began to form ideas that had not been imposed upon me. At church, there was time to just be present, to be fully in every moment. Whether it was singing or praying or listening to Pastor Willis's deep voice in the middle of an impassionate sermon, there was no worry about what was coming next. When I began to explore the world independently, to ask questions, to see the people and landscape around me with new eyes, I also began to discover fulfillment in choosing people I wanted to be around. Here was a family who gave me responsibility and found a use for my natural gifts. Here was a place I found connection and fellowship and activities that were spiritually and intellectually nurturing. The way I grew up was all about grinding to exist. That's the blue collar mentality. You work and work and work some more. Grinding, where I'm from, is all about brawn. Getting up early, staying up late, and putting in overtime meant success. In Detroit, personal success was always based on your ability to produce. To get up every day for 45 years and grind until that pension came. I could look at the older people in my neighborhood and see their hands worked over with arthritis. I could see the parts of life they were missing out on, doing night shifts, not seeing their kids grow up. Grinding, in the way I grew up, was necessary. But it's only one dimension of work. If you're only grinding, you can get worn down. Like a pestle against a motor, your mind and your body can become eroded if you don't find another way to work. Over the years, grinding served me for a while. It's the only way I knew how to do things. But at church and later in school, I learned that grinding isn't just about physical force, it's mental too. It's a kind of powering through work and life with total commitment. It's a way of thinking about yourself holistically, asking what your mind can do, what your heart can do, what your brain can do. It's about working smarter, not necessarily harder. Today, I still grind, but I do it differently, with a goal beyond just existing. I grind to be fulfilled and to get closer to my purpose. Surround yourself with support. Detroit Center was so small that whether I told my fellow congregants or not, they knew I was homeless. How could they not? I was showing up unwashed. I wore the same clothes all the time. Nobody was dropping me off at home and coming around to visit with my mom and dad. And of course, they began to look after me in the ways that only a family can. I got fed and clothed. I got invited into people's homes for dinner and prayer circles. In opening myself up to being cared for, I found care. I also found the woman I was going to marry. Dee Dee and I were friends first. She was raised by a single mother who had the grind mentality too. We were cut from the same cloth in a lot of ways. Dee Dee was a caregiver and she was serious. She got good grades and she knew what was up ahead of her. She worked hard. At first, I didn't tell Dee Dee what was going on with me. I sold her on the fact that I had a car and was living in Lathrop Village, the nice suburban place I had left behind. But eventually, I told her what my situation was. And I think it endeared me to her. I think she looked at me and saw a project. She would let me come over when her mom was at work and get me something to eat or tell me I could take a shower when it was obvious I hadn't had one in a while. She was kind to me and helped me see what I needed even when I didn't see it in myself. I think I was attracted to Dee Dee not only because she was kind and compassionate, but because she knew herself. Dee Dee always knew what she wanted and she went after it. In Dee Dee, I found somebody who saw me. In Detroit Center, I found a community who saw me. Although I had blocked myself off from my relatives, I still kept a part of myself open for connection. But this isn't always easy for other people. I'm an extrovert. No matter what's going on with me, I thrive on human connection. I have confidence in the fact that when I open my mouth, I will have something to say. And I've worked with my gift long enough to know that what I say will connect with whoever is listening. But what happens when you're an introvert and your natural state is to crawl back into your shell or to retreat from the world? In reality, introverts are often much better equipped to communicate than extroverts. Extroverts may have the confidence and the natural inclination to be outgoing, but the introvert has the ability to be 5 or 6 steps ahead intellectually. Most of the world's billionaires are introverts. If you're an introvert, you're working with one or you're working with one. It's important to be aware of keeping yourself open to communication because the introvert's natural state is in retreat from other people. You have to actively remind yourself that human support and connection are necessary to thriving. Introverts love clarity and transparency. If you're an introvert, communicate what kind of support you need and how you'd like to receive it. Practice the conversation ahead of time. Play out the potential scenarios in your mind. If you're working with an introvert, communicate what you need and what you want from them, and be clear about what you can do and will give to reciprocate support. For many of the athletes I work with, finding the right kind of support is a challenge. When you get to that level, your entire life is about proximity. Your teammates, your coaches, your doctors, they are all part of the team's ecosystem. You made some choices to get where you are, but you're also hemmed into a structure that is not entirely within your control. Even when you're the best athlete on the planet, victim mentality can take hold and isolate you. Some of the athletes I work with harbor resentment against their parents. So many times I hear about fathers who didn't show up to games, who weren't present for the wins and the losses. When I hear this, I ask athletes to consider where their fathers were when they were playing. Oftentimes the answer is, my dad was at work. So I asked them, who dropped them off at practice, or who paid for their shoes and uniform? I asked them how they think those things got paid for. Victim mentality makes you see what hasn't been done for you as opposed to what has been done for you. I always say that where your focus goes, your energy flows. If you're focusing on who wasn't there in your life or what you didn't get from them, it doesn't allow you to see who was there or how they were showing up in other ways. The victim in you makes you get into your feelings as opposed to your brain. Feelings are valid, but they are not evidence. I work with the UFC fighter, Macy Barber. on untangling her feelings about her father's opinions of her profession. Macy felt her dad wasn't supportive of her career in the sport. He had reservations about her becoming a fighter and potentially putting herself in harm's way. Macy had a difficult time separating the idea of her dad as someone who loved and supported her from the idea of his disapproval of her participation in the sport. Working with her, I helped her to separate her feelings from the evidence. Her father wasn't withdrawing his support from her, he was expressing his concern for her well being. I helped her to see that he was still there to support her through the challenges, but that she also had to allow him the freedom to feel what he feels. Separating feelings from fact can help us unpack the complexities of human relationships and get ourselves out of place of victimhood. When I coach athletes, I tell them to set aside their feelings for a moment and to look at the evidence. Often the evidence shows that they could never have gotten to where they are alone. They needed other people, their coaches, their parents, their aunts and uncles, their grandparents, their friends, their teammates. The evidence is always there. You are not alone. You have support. I find this to be timely, considering the post that I put out right before this message. The fact that there are young boys and men who have a gap in their lives because of the loss of their father, whether through death, incarceration, or the fact that maybe daddy just left. And we tend to blame ourselves. Now, it's impossible for me to blame myself for the loss of my father because my father was murdered when I was 2. But what we tell ourselves when we're in our feelings doesn't really matter in the moment. And our feelings does not produce the real evidence. And so what I had to learn as I began to go through my process of healing after having the desire to take my life, what I was exposed to from Eric Thomas was the importance of taking responsibility for me. I owe me. And even before this book came out, E.T. would preach that message. To understand that there's a standard of excellence that we have to strive towards. Not perfection, but excellence. And overcoming our feelings. See, I'm an extrovert as well. As a matter of fact, I was a super people pleaser. But I got to a place because of E.T., because of several others who stood in the gap for me, who mentored me. Glenn P. Brooks Jr., Kendall Ficklin, John Coleman, Charles Bradshaw, James Henry Allen. Men who stood in the gap for me to help me develop into the man I am today. And so I shared this portion of this message during the Confidence Builder series to encourage you, men, boys, if you have yet to deal with the trauma of your life, the loss of your father, the death of your father, your grandfather, your uncle, that man who was there in your life and now is gone, can I make a few suggestions? First of all, I appreciate the fact that you're listening this far. Right? I think we've been going a little over 30 minutes. So if you're still listening at this time, then I'm going to share some things with you, and it might make you uncomfortable, but I understand this. Your comfort zone is your failure zone. And it's easy to stay in your comfort zone because you're comfortable. You're in your feelings. You're in a place where you just cut yourself off from the world. But I want you to understand that your growth zone comes outside of your failure zone. Your growth zone comes when you're willing to acknowledge the fact that the pain you feel is real, but you ain't in control of how you sort it. You're in control of how you act on it, right? Sometimes people say, I just do it because that's how I feel. Like I smacked them because I was angry. Okay, we acknowledge that. But understand that every action carries with it an equal or opposite reaction. And that what you do has a consequence. And so we have to transition the hurt that we have in our heart and process it in our head so that we can then make the right decisions in every action. Because if we don't, we're going to end up in a place that we probably don't want to be in, therefore causing additional trauma not only to others but to ourselves. And so I share this with you because this is a part of confidence building, but because it's a part of clarity. The more clarity you obtain within yourself, the better you become in making decisions, which then leads to confidence. That confidence leads to your ability to communicate. Your ability to communicate then opens up the door for new connections that lead to collaboration opportunities. You see, not every collaboration opportunity has something to do with money. It's not about money. When we talk about collaboration creates currency, currency is not just money. Currency is energy, it's relationship, it's spirit, it's trust. Right? When you think about what E.T. was talking about in his book, that he had a friend named Bob who then connected him to Detroit Center, which then led him to a family. We're all one connection away, but we have to be open to making the right decisions. So like E.T. said, you're never alone. And yes, we acknowledge the loss of your father. We acknowledge the death of your daddy. We acknowledge the pain that you feel, that you may not know how to deal with it, but here's what I would recommend. I'm going to tell you, like my two friends told me November of 2015 when I was ready to take my life. They told me I had more to live for. They told me that I had family and friends that loved me. They told me that there's something on the other side of that adversity. They told me to get help. They told me to get help. They told me to get help. So I want to give a shout out to my brothers who stood in the gap for me. Ryan Bell, Tim Wilson, Terry Benford. I'm grateful that they were bold enough to tell me the truth, to tell me to get help. Shout out to Mr. Christmas. I'm not going to give his full name, but shout out to Mr. Christmas, who, when I went to see him, would always ask me what was my level of pain. He would always just let me talk and get out what was on my heart during our therapy sessions. And week after week after week, the level of pain would decrease until I got to a place where I had a system of operation on how to manage the way that I felt. And so I want to encourage you, men, boys, there's hope after your loss. There's life after your situation. And that in every adversity, there's a seed of an equal or greater benefit, but only for the mind that is positive. That's why we focus on the magic of thinking big. That's why I come on and I share insight and wisdom from books that are in my collection. And I'll be real with you. All these books I hadn't read them all. But I'm in a place now where I'm challenging myself to grow. You see, the greatest room for growth is personal growth. And each and every one of you that's listening, you haven't even tapped into the scratch of the potential that God has put on the inside of you. So as I wrap up, as I land the plane, understand it's you versus you. You're either a victim or a victor. You choose. Yes, your father's gone. Yes, your daddy's passed. Yes, he's no longer in your life. That's real. And the pain you feel is real. But I want to encourage you, there's life on the other side of that pain. Be encouraged, be blessed, but most of all, be faithful over the gift that you've been given. I want you to remember your gift will make room for you. Make sure you stay tuned every day. We're here between 7 and 8 a.m. most mornings for the Confidence Builder series, which is a part of the Collaboration Creates Currency movement. If you want to learn more about the Collaboration Creates Currency movement, visit thecollaborationcreatescurrencymovement.com. You want to order your copy of Collaboration Crazy Currency, go to collaborationcrazycurrency.com. If you want to order a copy of ET's book, UOU, go to Resist Booksellers, which is a phenomenal bookstore in Petersburg. They got several copies. Make sure you order your copy from there. You can order Collaboration Crazy Currency from there. You can order The Magic of Thinking Big from there. You know, we're all about supporting business through this movement. So with that, share your comments. If you're watching this on replay, put hashtag replay on here. But make sure, if you can, tag a young man or a father or an adult male who may have lost their father, and encourage them to watch this video and encourage them to get a copy of UOU. We'll see you soon. God bless. Peace.